Hello, we want to present about landscape resources for community during pandemic, case from urban Japan, and we will be talking about do it outside individually. My name is Maria Ermilova and I'm community coordinator in Chiba, Japan.
And my name is Mitsunari Terada. I'm supporting her presentation.
The purpose of this presentation is to share our reflection as community coordinators and while we're living there as a professional and just as a human. And we want, of course, discuss this shift toward do it outside individually, which is the main topic today. And the presentation will be consisted of 4 parts. We share the background, what we've been doing, and finally present this main idea and discuss with you. So we live in the neighborhood association building as a manager since 2016. And we are researchers and we are working together with community using landscape as a communication tool. Neighborhood association is not governmental institute, it's self-governance body managed by citizens, and we live in such a building on the 2nd floor. These are facilities, place to meet and engage in various circles, and even our wedding party was held in the community building. So let's talk about prehistory, what we've been doing. The goal of neighborhood association is to facilitate peaceful intergenerational, intercultural communication across as many people as possible to get familiar with community. However, people tend not to join activities which we are organizing because of old style Japanese neighborhood management, and they have low expectations. And while doing manager's job in community, we realize that, of course, yes, people tend to spend time inside these kind of activities. So if we bring and shift communities activities to outdoors, maybe more people can engage. So first as a managers, of course, we did traditional activities, which you see on the left inside, but then we start bringing communities outside. Because when you do it outside, you share the scenery, and accidentally people meet each other, which increase interaction and involve various people. So thinking about outdoor activities, we decided that we need to create some spaces using landscape to provide a place for communication, and of course, community gardens. So it's design and build project, which we did facilitated for 3 years, and it's inspired by University of Washington and service learning projects. So we did various gardens.
So we created this open space and garden and also community garden with citizens.
Problem statement. So after doing various events inside neighborhood association building and outside, we noticed that events-based activity always bring the same people, same faces, based on personal relations, and groups does not mix with each other. Communication doesn't move forward, so the goals of neighborhood association is not achieved to involve as many people as possible. So we have an image, and we often see the cases of placemaking as creating a setting to communicate between random urban individuals, facilitating communication between them on a neutral territory. However, as managers in Japanese neighborhood association, we work with the neighborhood where people know each other for a long time and the strong territory and group feeling. So it creates barriers for communication. However, if we find some triggering symbol, people are happy to engage with the coordinator like me and Charlie individually. Therefore, we speak about do it outside individually and using landscape tools for communication. So this do it outside individually, the scheme on the right side, you see that we are using various symbols in the landscape, which are triggering people to engage. And because we use various symbols, traditional, new, and biophilic, so various groups of people involved. First example is culturally significant plants, wildflowers. Many people tend to use Western flowers in their gardens. However, we planted native plants for ecological reason. And we met many elderly people who react to these plants through these plantations. They ask many questions, they start exchanging plants, and we become friends with many elders in the community because they react to culturally significant plants.
Yes, because they were kids. They see these flowers in their paddy field.
In
so
the
they
countryside.
remind these kind of memories through the plants.
Next example is children. To work with children, we introduce ground cover project and let children plant a new life. Ground covers spread in the park, and of course it has ecological significance, but for children, they learn how to grow and they like to come to park to see how plants are growing. Next example is doing another garden with the animals inside, with the golden fishes. And a very interesting story that one neighbor who's been living in the community for a long time but never participated in any activity suddenly contacted us in SNS and suggested his help. He said, okay, I have some free aquariums at home, and do you mind if I come and help you managing the pond because it looks like you need my help? This is how triggers are working with people, and because they want to share their passion. Another great example.
Yes. So when we meet these kids often, we always see these kids wear these train shoes.
Shinkansen shoes.
Yeah. And it reminds my childhood, and I realized that every small kids loves trains. So we put these train toys in the garden.
And many kids involve. When little boys see the train, they react immediately. And many people from the area with the little boy kids, they came and start playing with the train. Next example, silkworm. Silkworm is not a simple insect. It's a cultural artifact bringing different generations together. Because in this neighborhood, many of elderly experience growing silkworms when they were younger. When we show them silkworms, it's immediately triggering some small talk or sharing the memory.
So children often come to neighborhood association building, but they often play games. But they gradually get attention to silkworms because they feel disgusting a bit, but it's interesting. So they keep watching, and they start streaming by Line or other social network.
Yes. Next example, traditional decoration. Koinobori is a traditional Japanese decoration for Children's Day on 5th of May. And now people cannot use it in urban setting because it's too big. However, when we bring the koinobori and put in the local park, many people come to take pictures, and of course they share their memories and their pleasure with us. So we come to discussion. So what can be a communication triggering symbol? Let's get into it. So in our experience of doing community design based on landscape in Japanese neighborhood, we came to realizing that making activity outdoors brings attention, and making activity individually using some triggering symbol increase communication with various people, which help to achieve the goal of neighborhood association.
We can also say that it's planned activity by us, but for them, it's totally look like coincidence or accident.
Yes. So individual network is more resilient because during time of pandemic, official neighborhood association activities were canceled. And in lockdown, we officially couldn't use the neighborhood association building. But this kind of individual encounters, which we arranged, keep happening every time during seasonal celebrations, during the flowering season, and when we have to raise silkworms and make this garden with a train. So these kind of small encounters created such abundant communication in the neighborhood. So we didn't feel there's some stopping during pandemic. So we have some questions to the audience. What are the symbols which connect people in your location? Please share examples with us.
Toy or plants or
insects, maybe some biophilic or biocultural symbols in your area. We will be happy to receive examples from you. and hear what are you using for community design. And also, what do you think about DIOI? Do it outside individually pattern. Yes, I think that's it for today. Thank you.
And so next we have Dean and folks from the Shade Institute.
Hi, everybody. This is Dean Sakamoto, Executive Director of Shade Institute. We're here at the Kapolei Heritage Center in Hawaii, and we're here to share with you the results of our community design workshop for the Kanahili Community Association Park. And here are our Shade Fellows who will help me to summarize what we're about to share with you. So I'm going to share with you some clips from our recorded session, which is a hybrid community design workshop, hybrid in person and virtual. I hope you enjoy.
We are Shade Institute, a local nonprofit organization located in Ible, Honolulu, Hawaii. SHADE stands for Sustainable Humanitarian Architecture and Design for the Earth. The Institute's mission is to provide community-based planning and design through intern training and professional mentorship to underserved communities and other nonprofit organizations. Today, we held our second community design workshop for residents of Kanahili.
There were 3 objectives for this workshop. The first was to gather community input from Kanahili Community Association leadership and Kanahili residents in response to the first community design workshop. The second is to obtain feedback on the preliminary design plan alternatives. And lastly, to determine which design is most preferred by the residents, as well as any additional guidance they could provide to move forward with the preliminary design.
This summer, SHADE made a goal to reach out to as many Kanahili residents as possible concerning phase 2 of the project. We made banners, brochures, stickers, fans, and postcards to distribute information to the residents as efficiently as possible. We held 2 outreach events to talk to residents about their visions and goals of the park, in addition to passing out surveys to gain input on the design proposal. Overall, we had 80 survey responses, which helped to guide the design process. Randy Akau, president of Kanahili Community Association, was a big help in reaching out to residents and is passionate about the future of the park. Here's a short interview with Randy Akau.
Moving forward, they'll be very happy to see that they have this opportunity. It's their from generations to generations. As a people, unite our community together, knowing that we can finally, put into practice what we're taught from our owners and from our grandparents and from our parents, the essential and important way for Native to practice their culture. So this all kind of started when, I think it goes back to around 2018, when I first met Randy Akau, your president. Actually, it was his beautiful wife, Jody, who introduced me to, along with Ivalani, introduced me to Randy. And then within a few months, Randy shared this drawing. Randy made this drawing. He said, hey, Dean, we already have phase 1 done, which is the play courts, the KK playground, and then the fence and the gate. But we need phase 2.
After meeting with community leaders and producing multiple concept sketches, we arrived at Concept 1, which we presented in our first workshop. Concept 1 takes into consideration the program elements that community leaders at Kanahili proposed. Phase 1 of the project has an existing basketball and volleyball court, as well as a keiki playground. In phase 2, the parking is a one-way loop system around the perimeter of the park, made to maximize parking stalls without compromising green space. Phase 2 programs include a community center, splash pad, and space for cultural activities, among other programs. An important element of the plan is the relocation of an existing monkey pod tree that was planted by a resident years ago. After gathering feedback from CDW1, there were some changes that we implemented to address the comments made by residents concerning the Concept 1 site plan, which led us to Concept 2. Here is the Concept 2 site plan of Kanahili Community Association Park. A lot of the program and features are similar, but are rearranged to address layout and accessibility. One of the primary concerns with Concept 1 that we wanted to address was the location of the community center and its relationship to the parking spots for residents to easily come and go. In Concept 1, the community center acts as a hub, centralized in the middle of the park. In Concept 2, the community center houses the same means of program, but instead looks out over the entire park and is a bit closer to the additional parking that was added in the northeast corner. Compared to Concept 1, which has 79 additional parking spots, Concept 2 has 98 additional spots, but both do share the same one-way loop system. The highlighted areas show the primary differences in Concept 2 as compared to Concept 1, which would be the location of the community center and the splash pad. In Concept 2, the splash pad takes on a more central location and solidifies the area on the north side of the park as a larger keiki play space that also includes the existing playground and paved basketball and volleyball court. A larger comfort station equipped with restrooms, tables, and chairs was also added for parents to look out over the splash pad to keep an eye on their children while relaxing in the shade.
Because the workshop was a hybrid of in-person and virtual meetings, we encourage residents to discuss the models in both settings.
I see Jennifer has her hand up.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Makikau. I've lived in the Kanahili area for 9 years now. I like either of them. I do like Concept 2. I agree with Adam about the emu because that is close to the residential, you know, and if there's smells like that, it might be overpowering. I kind of like Concept 2 because if you have a party, at least if the residents want to use the park or the basketball court, it would not interfere with someone's gathering.
We use Miro as a form of record keeping and virtual engagement. Here is the outcome of that discussion. We encourage residents to provide feedback about each concept and recorded the comments given to us using virtual sticky notes so that residents could see their input live.
After this, we did a quick Zoom poll and determined that Concept 2 is the preferred plan among the residents. However, this is not the end of our community engagement. Through the creation of Hui Mea Hohanas, aka user groups, we're maintaining contact with interested community members in regards to the future design and development of the park. We use Miro again to record signups of those interested as well as any additional comments.
In this workshop, the 3 objectives stated earlier were completed. We gathered input from Kanahili Community Association leadership and residents in response to the first community design workshop. We obtained feedback on the 2 design alternatives, and finally, a preferred design was selected. Overall, we learned that Concept 2 was the design that connected with residents best. As fellows, we learned that while having these discussions over Zoom is helpful, being able to meet residents in person provides a different level of experience, one that is slightly more engaging and active.
So, what does it take to get back in the field during a global pandemic? It takes a lot of preparation and planning across multiple media platforms and software. It was at times difficult to keep the same level of engagement as one would do otherwise, but we have found it rather effective to hold virtual meetings. It allowed for live recordings of the event and community feedback as seen with the mural boards. In fact, this very presentation was made possible because of these features, even though we just finished this workshop moments ago.
Mahalo for watching our presentation. Due to the surge of COVID-19 cases in Hawaii, we had to convert into a hybrid workshop. Although our workshop was primarily on Zoom, we were fortunate enough to engage with residents in person under COVID-19 safety guidelines. Moving forward, we hope to have our 3rd workshop in person if given the opportunity and provide the residents of Kanahili with a final preliminary design.
Great, thank you. Very impressive project that combined offline and online engagement with the community, and also very impressive work from developers. Right, let me go ahead and share our 3rd presentation.
Thank you for allowing me to be part of such a valuable meeting today. I would like to talk about the Great East Japan Earthquake Reconstruction Planning Without Woman's Voice case study of Otsuchi. My name is Miwako Kitamura. First, I would like to explain the background of Otsuchi, including geographic, economic, and demographic information. The damage of the Great East Japan earthquake caused to Otsuchi was enormous. This is because many people in town leadership, including the mayor, who was supposed to take the lead to such an emergency, disappeared by the tsunami. In addition, the cars used for the evacuation could not reach the town because of the rubble that was swept away by the tsunami caught fire. The town of Otsuchi continued to burn about 3 days after the earthquake. Under such circumstances, the people affected had to live without infrastructure such as water, gas, and electricity for about a week. Here is a tsunami map in Otsuchi. The town of Otsuchi experienced tsunami damage, as it appears if you look at the tsunami map. Note that the map shows that the city key functions such as government offices were set up in the tsunami prompt area. Of course, the government officers are aware of the danger, but I have heard that the government offices were built in the area to improve daily functionary rather than withstand tsunami damage. When the office conducted evacuation drills every year, unfortunately, the Great Japan earthquake and the tsunami exceeded the damage forecast of the drill. This bar graph meanwhile shows the average income in Japan, the average income in Tokyo, and the average in Otsuchi. From this graph, it can be seen that the income of the people of Otsuchi is less than the average in Tokyo. Before the Great East Japan earthquake, the population of Otsuchi was about 60,000, but the number of the fallen to 12,000. About 1,200 people died or went missing during the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. And the town has a decline and aging population pre-disaster and post-disaster as well. In 2012, the town of Otsuchi proceeded with urban planning of the project area and the main road for the land readjustment. They received the municipality approval of the Disaster Prevention Group Reconstruction Project based on the basic plan formulated by resistance in the previous year. This strategy is each district were materials that become and commercialized. However, the town hall could not manage the design and the construction of public facilities and infrastructure in all Otsuchi community itself, as it lacked engineers and lacked the people and relies on the fixed-term support staff for the most of their work. The Otsuchi design meeting at the background. Since the formulation of the basic plan in 2011, the town of Otsuchi has adapted the system in which town hall itself, consultant and coordinator include academic expert from the unit each village discuss various issue of the district basis. In addition, the mayor's policy to provide the forum for the community to discuss issue and reflect the result of the recovery plan as much as possible. However, as a result of discussion, it was decided that the policy would not be formed unit the town hall constructors and academic experts for each villages and put together guidelines for the repeatedly discussion by the resident. In particular, the public facilities and public space, while promoting each project, the overall goal is to achieve the future vision of the town of indicated in the basic reconstruction plan and harmonize with the reconstruction and urban development project. The Otsuchi Design Council confirms, adjusted and advises the quality of the planning and the design of the public facilities and the public spaces from the viewpoint of space and landscape formulation in response to the materials presented by the secretaries. The Council studies a guideline for the landscape formulation and completed design policy for the public facilities and the public spaces for the whole town. According to the background, the construction plan was created by architects, city planner, developers, and community members. However, the reality was different. I had an interview with a woman in this area. She has been living in this area more than 50 years, like Miss E. And the other day, the community loved the trees in cherry blossom. Upon learning that the trees would be cut down and part of the post-disaster reconstruction plan, she and other local people strongly opposed the decision. However, they were advised that the decision was final. Only one of the many trees blossom tree was left planted to front of the new community center after the earthquake. The other trees were severely damaged from the tsunami, and after relocation, they became progressively weaker. Also, this is saying that residents are the main actors in the community development, like Mrs. E, who usually makes tea at such meetings, did not know how to behave. Even before the disaster, she had attended introductory community meeting but had not spoken out. Women in the community do not like to stand out. And at meeting, the women are expected to do work that is not related to the content of the meeting, such as making tea. After the disaster, women did not feel that they could speak out in an interview with the author. She also says that most women were too busy running the evacuation shelter at the time of when workshops on recovery planning were carried out. She is aware of the need to implement the massive landsliding in the residential area to save lives from the future tsunami in this area, which was heavily damaged by the tsunami. However, losing the cherry blossom trees was heartbreaking because they held many memories for her. She regretted being powerless in protecting the trees to think that she might have been able to save them if she were a man with political power. Next example for reconstruction planning without mother's voice. This article was originally published in the Mainichi newspaper in 2019. A survey by the Otsuchi Playground Project at a group of volunteer parents, mainly the mothers in Otsuchi, which is still recovering from the Great Ichijab earthquake, found that more than 80% of the town's residents have had problem finding places for their children to play. According to the town of Otsuchi, there were 12 parks with the play equipment in the town before the earthquake. However, most of them were washed away by the tsunami. The parks was built as part of the town reconstruction effort, but the installation playground equipment, which is funded solely by the town, is costly and has been put off. Ms. Kamitani, she is one of the mothers readers, said nearly 40% of the respondents wanted to take care of the cleaning and management of the park itself, which is considered a burden. We would like to build the park with playground area so that children can have a place of play. The mother's wish has not come true yet. The missing woman's voice, I just talking about the example for all the cherry blossom had been cut down, leaving only one. The hope for the parks for the children's play is not fulfilled. What should we prepare for our future? As I explained that the Great Ichijab earthquake caused extensive damage. The area has always had a low birth rate and also declining population. This is also the same situation as developed countries. So the future depends on the proper preparation is needed in advance. Can we have a quick workshop after the disaster? It's very challenging for the other survivors. The countries that experience frequent disaster need to plan in advance. Long-term research based on the fieldwork is needed because we definitely listen to the voice for the survivors. And no matter how well planned and beautiful a city is, it cannot exist without the people. Thank you for participating.
Great, wonderful. It's a very poignant lessons for post-disaster reconstruction. One good thing about these pre-recorded presentations is that we all finish on time. So we have plenty of time for discussion. And for those who have just joined us, the focus of this session is the role of landscapes after COVID-19. So we have just heard from 3 presentations that address the relationship between landscape and community engagement in 3 landscape or spatial scale. So starting at the scale of the neighborhood association in the case of Iwase and Chiba. And the design of a new park is a part of a new community development on Oahu Island. And then the lessons of post-disaster reconstruction in Otsuchi, Japan, in which the voices of women were unfortunately missing. So although the last case doesn't really address the context of the pandemic, I think the lessons are still relevant. So we can start taking questions in the chat, and also feel free to add to the Jamboard that the link I have shared with you in the chat as well. But I thought while we're waiting for people to ask questions, you can also raise your hand as well. I thought I can start with a round of questions for each of the speakers. So my first question is for Dean and the Shea Institute Fellows. So about the role of landscapes, I was particularly struck by the way, actually connecting your presentation to other presentations, I was particularly struck by the way Maria and Charlie talk about landscape as a communication tool. And then also in Miyoko's case, how certain voices are missing and therefore the place meanings and story did not get communicated. So in your case, how do you deal with the meaning and stories of places? Did those come up in your interaction with the residents, or this, do these stories kind of come into play in the design? And then my second question is for Maria. It appears that the pandemic, did not stop engagement from happening, and being outside actually has an advantage during the pandemic because presumably the ventilation is better. It's easier to socialize, and also to social distance as well. And I just wonder about your thoughts about this particular role of the outside during the pandemic. In addition to, I think you articulate really well, I think the significance of being outside in general. But what are the specifics during the pandemic that might come into play? And then I have a question for Miwako as well. So does the pandemic present additional barriers for community engagements in the case of Otsuchi? Or did it not matter at all because engagement was not strong before anyway? So how can we overcome this issue? Okay, Dean and the fellow, you want to start?
Hi, great question, Jeff. And maybe I'll just start with a little bit of more context about Kanahili and the park site. I just realized that because we were off-site and did a hybrid workshop, you didn't see any of the images of the actual park site in itself, but we do have a lot of that. Kanahili is a native Hawaiian homestead land, and it's kind of like the situation of the Native Americans, where the government put aside land for the native people of Hawaii, and gave them this homestead land, which is formerly industrial agricultural site. It was sugarcane land, and so everyone who's living in Kanahili now, which is pretty much a new 10-year-old subdivision on former cane land, which was once native Hawaiian land in itself, but it was kind of erased by the industrial agriculture over 100 years ago. And now they're returning back to the land. So everyone in Kanahili, the homesteaders are from somewhere else. That's what's really interesting. So they bring different stories. And, you know, we haven't been able to even get there yet. And largely, I think, because of this kind of barrier because of the COVID thing. Our first workshop with them was totally online, and the second one was kind of virtual. And we're hoping the third one will actually be on site where we can actually have more engagement. But with that, I'll turn it over to the fellows who I should introduce. This is Kong Tran, who's at the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at University of Hawaii. And he's about to finish in the coming year in his graduate degree. We have Jason Henning from University of Southern Florida, recently graduated with a master's in architecture, and Valeria Zader, also from the University of Southern Florida with a master's in architecture. So you guys want to respond?
Oh, yeah. So, hi, I'm Valeria. An important aspect of the design and the concept is that we focus a lot on resiliency and sustainability, but not only at an environmental level, but also culturally. So a lot of the program that we have proposed now revolve around the Hawaiian culture. So we have hula mounds, craft pavilions, and Hawaiian games in as a way of trying to allow the Hawaiian culture to move on multiple generations. So bringing it as a way of introducing it to the younger ones from the older generation. And I think that's something important to mention in regards to how the land and the culture interact.
I think Valeria put that perfectly. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Exactly what Valeria said, and a lot of the programming for the park in the future will evolve around teen and young children, or in Native Hawaiian keiki programming, and to instill values of both Native Hawaiian traditions, or just values in general, to learn about life skills, or things that you should learn as a child to help you grow into a young adult. We hope to utilize in the future programmatic elements of the park.
Great, thank you. It looks like a very promising project, and if we have more time later on, I'd like to kind of know more about the online, offline.
Sure, yeah, we'd be happy to field any questions.
Okay, Maria, do you want to respond to my question earlier?
Yes. Hello, everyone. As I understood the question, it was about being outside. And the situation with the pandemic in Japan in general, and like how do we balance on doing some activities, right?
Yes.
So actually, in Japan, pandemic, but the situation didn't look so heavy, and people followed restrictions, like recommended restrictions, like 3 C's. 3 mitsu, as you say in Japanese. Well, don't stay together, don't chat, and yes, don't go out to the place where are many people. So people knew that we shouldn't gather in big numbers. That was clear. So that's why we underline in our presentation the individual approach. So it means when we are walking outside in the community, we meet people, and it will be like a small talk between very small group, and it sounds like okay for a person, and because in the situation of isolation you really urge to talk to someone. And I think we mentioned that the community where we are living is very aged, so even for us, people who know how to access maybe communication via smartphones, internet, for many it's not possible. So they feel really lonely at home. So when we meet on the street, we chat, we end up chatting. And we mentioned in our presentation, for this chat, we use some triggers in the landscape, like flowers, which has cultural significance, or animals, which is like a fish, but it starts a conversation. And so creating such small triggers for conversation really helped to communicate with many people, which are just passing by. Yes, so this is how it works in this kind of individual way.
Great, great. Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question for everybody, but I'll raise that question later on. Thank you. Miyako.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes, yes. I understand that because today's presenter, I don't mention about any kind of COVID-19. So I just want to talk about a small story about COVID-19 the situation in Otsuchi at the moment. In this area, Otsuchi, there is still no cases. About 6 months ago, I interviewed various rumors about their COVID-19 status. Many of the Great East Japan earthquake survivors lost their lives when their family, neighbors, and friends were swept away by the tsunami in right front of them. That's why they take life extremely very seriously. And some of them told me the same things. We want to live a long and precious life because the tsunami saved our lives. So that's why the community people have formed a patrol group or the local people to check the car even from the other prefectures. They had our own strict rules, and such as not leaving their houses for a while after going into town. And I also had that almost no one refused to take the vaccine in this area. So this kind of community-based civil protection seems to have been very important in the fight against this kind of disease. This is kind of the answer to you.
Right, right. That's very important to know. Okay, so I have a follow-up question. This is actually for everybody. During the pandemic, the use of parks and open space or green space has actually increased dramatically in a lot of places in North America, in Europe. So in North America, for example, I think there's an increase at about 50 to 75%. In Europe, it's even higher, 75 to 100%. But the situation in Asia is, Asia Pacific is a little bit different. Korea still has a small increase of 25 to 50%. But for Japan, it actually went down from 0 to negative 25%. Taiwan and Australia, negative 25 to negative 50%. And then in Vietnam and Thailand, even more, negative 50 to negative 75%. So I'm just curious about kind of your own observation because we're coming together from different places, and how might you explain the differences? Dean, you want to start? What's the situation in Hawaii?
Well, we're having an uptick in cases here with the Delta variant, and the tourists have been coming back here in droves. That's one part of it. But what's interesting is that they're supposed to pass a COVID test before they arrive. So we're not quite sure how all of this is happening. Maybe somebody more in tune with all of that knows. But for us, it's been a challenge, but we've been able to utilize the advantage of being out here in Hawaii and do some engagement on the street, like you saw in some of the slides where Kung and Jason and Valeria were out there and meeting people, trying to get their interest and their information. But it is very different. And also the point you brought up about the stories. This is a very unique situation because normally we work in a place-based setting, and in Hawaii is very important where you're standing, what happened here, what are the connections, the social connections, physical, historical, environmental conditions, and we usually get a lot of information on that. But in this homestead situation where you basically have a new community of people from different places from around the islands, we're not quite there yet. So I think your question sort of plants another seed with us, and we understood that challenge, but that and the COVID, I think makes it even more interesting.
Okay. What about the use of parks and open space in general? Not just this particular project, but.
Can
you asking me?
Share.
Oh, next, someone goes. Yeah, someone else.
Yeah, Maria, go ahead.
Yeah.
Share some observations from Japan,
Yes.
from somewhere near the Tokyo. So in area near Tokyo, the most dense population area in the world. We know, so the parks were closed a few situations when there was a restriction. So the parks were kind of advised by the government, please don't go to park, please don't use the equipment. And even on the children's play equipment were some
tape.
Tape, and please don't enter. So only in dense area like Tokyo. However, also maybe we should think about cultural use of green spaces, because like, for example, in Japan, Hanami is the season, and you don't just go out to the park. You don't just look at the nature like maybe in some European countries or North America, but you're supposed to like enjoy by drinking, chatting, and this is exactly which we don't want during pandemic. So it was also strongly advised not to engage in Hanami, and maybe even some parks in Tokyo, like Yoyogi Park, were just closed. And yes, many landscape parks around Tokyo were closed during peak seasons of pandemic.
Yeah, that's the situation is similar in Taiwan too. So that might explain the decrease in the number of users. Miyako, is it different in Tohoku?
Can you hear? Yes, Tohoku is quite different from Tokyo because of the population. The size is so much different from Tokyo, especially after the disaster. So, and also adding information for that, we don't have any, as I explained, especially the Otsuchi, they don't have equipmented parks. So it means very difficult gathering people. Only in this COVID-19 case is kind of positive. However, understanding the community people is some kind of regretted to have some no gathering the occasion or anything. I quite agree with Maria.
Yeah, it's very in Seattle. We at one point the city government was going to close the park, but the people protested, so they kept the park open. But you cannot stay in the park. You have to keep walking. So that way, we don't get people crowding together. So that's the way. And then in some parts in the US, they have this what they call a germ circle. So the social distance circle. So that's also a sort of design intervention to prevent kind of crowding as well. So we have actually one question in the chat from Glenn. And I don't know if Dean, you can actually read it. I can read it out for you. So for Shade project, what types of organization will have access to the community park, and how will these groups be reviewed to ensure they are using amenities with a cultural significance properly, i.e. hula mounts? Dean, the fellow?
Yes, yes. The park, the Kanahili Community Association Park is primarily for the around 400 family homes in that association, but it will be open to other members of the public, but the association will have control. It's a kind of a public-private situation. And their plan is to have, their own maintenance, their own operations, and their own organization running the facilities, which includes the community center, the play areas, the play field. And Imu, by the way, is a traditional Hawaiian underground oven. You might have thought it was some exotic bird, but it's an underground oven. And Keiki translates to children, and Kupuna translates into elders.
Great. Thanks for adding that. I think those are really important to know. When do you finish the project? I mean, at what point are you in the process?
Gung, would you like to answer that?
Yes, we're in the phase of finalizing a preliminary design concept. So we just finished our second workshop, and then we'll get the feedback from the residents, and then finalize a design for them to give additional guidance and feedback in the third workshop. And then after that, we'll hopefully finalize a preliminary final design to work into the next phase of the project. We'll be going through a environmental assessment, kind of like a report before we construct the project, and reviewing the project with the government agency, the Department of Hawaiian Homeland, to review the project, and hopefully they are the final approval before we construct the project. And that would take around maybe roughly now it's maybe 5 years.
That's right. It's about around a 5-year timeline if we start with everything, continue with everything tomorrow.
Right, right. So you have quite some time.
Yes,
Yes.
that's why we're starting them young.
Yes, yes. The fellow will be all professionals by then. Right. Okay. Do we have any other questions from the audience? If not, I actually have one more question for Maria. So I was just wondering how long you and Charlie have lived in the community that you're now the coordinator or the manager of the neighborhood association, right? So
yes.
How did you develop the relationship with the rest of the residents? I mean, I work with Kanahili Sensei as well, and in his neighborhood, he worked for, I think, at least 5 years before he was accepted by the community as sort of a member of the community that he can actually speak up in meetings. So there, this is not just in Japan. I think in a lot of Asian countries, neighborhoods, similar kind of hierarchy as well. So I was just wondering how you develop your relationship with the rest of the residents.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Thank you, Jeff. I actually read, yes, your article with Kinoshita Sensei describing, yes, his attempts to develop relationship with the neighborhood, which is also actually in the same city. However, the neighborhood where we are living is in the center of city, and it has a history, but not as deep history as Kinoshita Sensei's neighborhood. And therefore, just several people here are living here for multiple generations, like 16 generations, but just a few households. And I think speaking about joining the neighborhood, we have a very good position as a weak position, because we were students when we just come in 2016, which is almost 5 years ago. And as a students, we are looked down, and we are looked as someone who will be helping. So, and someone who needs help, because we actually made a contract with the neighborhood association so we can live in the building for free. And in exchange, we are providing the facilitation of some landscape projects and doing as much as we can to bring young people here and to make neighborhood communicating with each other more. Because as I mentioned, only the same faces are showing up. So being students, being weak, and actually needing some support, that make these strong elderly members of community look at you as someone who needs help. So I think being a professor is a different thing. So
right. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so Kinoshita Sensei was in different position. And also because I'm a foreigner, also it, I guess, have some meaning. So as an outsider, you are totally different. You are not looked at with the same requirements or with the same attitude. So if, as a foreigner, you're also welcome with the interest in exchange to your culture, and with understanding that you cannot maybe perform as well as a member of community if you were Japanese. So I think it's also played a role.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I have a similar question for Miyako. How did you, is your role purely a researcher in this particular case, or how did you make connection to the community?
Yes, actually, this area is very difficult to make kind of connection because especially after disaster, many workshops has held, but nowadays no one believes that's someone coming from especially outside because that's kind of severe experience. So that's why for myself, it takes more than 6 years to have built relationship. The first I visited some women and help them, just listen them, is to be very extremely patient. My relationship with them, it takes so long time. That's why after the 10 years, the disaster, they really want to talk what exactly happened at the time of disaster. I think for recently.
Great, great. Wonderful.
That's why I think many people really want to some.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry. And that's why I think the many women now really want to talk something, what they really want to do after the 10 years of disasters.
Great, wonderful. All right, well, we have only 1 minute left. I think this is a really interesting collection of cases. I think they not only show the important role of landscape, but more about kind of how landscape as a vehicle for communication, for social connections, and how those connections and stories and meanings are also very important in terms of developing projects like the one in Kanahili, for example. Okay, so we're out of time. So let's come back to the main room, and we might need a few more minutes to get ready. And also, the Jamboard is still open, so please feel free to use the Jamboard if you have more things to share. But in the meantime, let's come back to the main room. Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming to room 3.